Well, we are going to get into that right now. I want to bring in our next guest to help break down those numbers and what we saw. Megan Leonhardt with Barron's. Great to have you on, Megan. And we saw the numbers. They're very good on the jobs, but we saw unemployment creeping up.
It was a really mixed bag report today. And it was something that I think you have to look at everything in context. It was certainly good for payrolls. We actually got way more job growth than we were expecting in September. Remember that economists sort of anticipated that we would get about 50,000 jobs in the month of September. We got 119, according to the BLS's latest estimate. And that, really does sort of kind of give us a little bit more reassurance that the jobs market is not collapsing. There's a little bit more momentum in hiring. It seems maybe as we were going into the fall, things got a little bit easier. And, that's good news for sure. But as you pointed out, we did have a tick up in unemployment. And it's interesting because we always, of course, round it to the nearest 10. So it was 4.4% in September. Obviously, this was a little bit higher than the 4.3% that we saw in August. But when you start looking at the details here, it actually was a decent jump month to month. And so that is something that we need to keep an eye on, especially because this report really didn't take into the effects any of the shutdown, any of the, sort of job losses over the last couple of months where we had many of those layoff announcements. So all of that is something worth really watching in this data.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And with the data, it would be nice if coming up we would get the October report, but that's not going to be in the cards.
It's not. And this is a big deal for not only, economists and investors, but it also is a big deal for Federal Reserve officials. If you remember, we do have a big meeting coming up on December 9th and 10th. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics actually came out this week and said, you know what, there's, so many issues because of this government shutdown. Remember, they weren't collecting, they weren't processing, they weren't analyzing any data for that 43-day shutdown. So that means they've missed really critical periods of data collection. So what they said was, we're not going to have an unemployment rate at all for October. And those payrolls, we're going to get those, but we're going to put them in with the November report. And that's not coming out until mid-December. So it's after the policy meeting, which means Federal Reserve officials are going into that meeting without that sort of gold standard of Federal Reserve federal statistics that they really do rely on.
And Megan, I feel like we're such in an interesting spot right now with the economy. I mean, leading into this week, even before this week, there was a lot of talk with investors saying, okay, are we now in this AI bubble? And then NVIDIA releases the earnings yesterday, and then they said, no, we're not in the bubble anymore. We're not in the bubble anymore. But then today, it looks like they were back on the bubble talk because we saw those markets really take a slide in the afternoon hours.
It's been a tough road, I think, for many of the AI giants, if you will. I do think that NVIDIA's earnings were a good sign, and they should sort of tame some of the jitters that we've seen in the market. It was interesting because I feel like when it comes to these AI earnings, we get the earnings, they're really good. Investors are very excited for a bit. And then, I think they do a little bit of a fear pullback. And so there's a 24, 48-hour cycle where people are like, well, this is too good to be true. I don't believe it. And then we start to, get those nuanced tastes, get the details, all of that good stuff. So I would give it a little bit longer before I really started worrying about market reaction to especially the NVIDIA reporting earnings. But it is one of those situations that I do think there are valid concerns to be had around the AI plays. But you have to remember that, we're talking about something that has the potential to be a general purpose technology. It is something that can be really life changing and will potentially have tons of trickle down effect. So I think investors, really should be playing this in a very wide lens. It's not just those AI companies that they really need to be looking at. It's anything that has the potential to really be augmented or improved by AI. And that can be things like healthcare or even warehousing, not necessarily those, kind of traditional spots that you would think of that, oh yeah, that's AI play.
Yeah, that's so true. Great insight and analysis here, not only on the market, but of course, the jobs reports out. Megan, great to have you on. Thanks so much for being with us on Live Now.
Of course. No, thanks for having me.